Welcome to the Foundational Health Podcast, where we provide education and inspiration to help guide you on your journey to look better, feel better, and most importantly, heal better. Hello and welcome to the Foundational Health Podcast. I'm Dr. Kevin Schultz, and today we are going to talk about the importance of recovery, which is pillar number 4 of foundational health. As always, we're going to look at this topic of recovery through the lens of the 3 goals of foundational health, which are look better, feel better, and heal better. If you incorporate the things that we talk about today and stick with them, that's the key, stick with them, I promise you are going to look better by having less bags under your eyes, less wrinkles on your face, or better yet, if you're lucky enough to be listening to this at a young age, you can avoid getting those to the extent of what so many people do as they age. You're going to feel better because you're going to have less aches and pains from recovery. You're going to have a better mood. You're going to have better energy, better focus. And then really, recovery is all about healing. So you're no question you are going to heal better. In fact, we're going to talk about sleep. That's the primary form that our body does recover in. We're going to talk about sleep and how some research points to the fact that 85% of our healing recovery takes place during the deep stages of sleep. So really important, obviously, to know how do you get into those deep stages of sleep faster? How can you stay in them longer? We're going to discuss all of that. So first, let's talk about what is the definition of recovery. So if you look up the definition of recovery, it says that recovery is a return to a normal state of health, mind, or strength. Now, obviously, in the ideal world, we wouldn't have to return to that normal state, right? We would still be or always be in that normal state of health, mind, and strength. But we don't live in the ideal world. So let's talk about how, with all of the stressors that we deal with on a daily basis, the physical and emotional, how we can recover, how we can return to a normal state of health, mind, or strength. So sleep is going to be the big topic that we're going to talk about today, but we're also going to talk about my 3 favorites. Really, it doesn't get much more foundational than these 3. And then the good news is that these 3 are free. And that would be sunlight, fresh air, and something we call grounding. So we're going to start off with sunlight. So really simple. We know that sunlight increases vitamin D3. Pretty much everybody knows that, right? Well, vitamin D3, we call it a vitamin. Technically, it's a hormone. Not only does sunlight increase and help balance vitamin D3 in our body, we know that sunlight also helps balance and increase lots of hormones. The feel-good hormones, it helps lower the bad hormones, cortisol. Feel-good would be something called serotonin. I think this is important to talk about now. What I'm discussing today, or what I discuss in any podcast, some of it is common sense, yes, but it's not just my opinion. This is based on legit science. And so if you look at this balancing of hormones that takes place during sunlight, we know, for instance, that the people that live in Alaska or other climates throughout the world, and they have those long periods of darkness where they're not getting sunlight. Well, during those long periods of darkness, we know that vitamin D3 in their body decreases dramatically. We know that cortisol goes up, that serotonin, the feel-good hormone, goes down. They call that seasonal affective disorder. And any of us can experience that. But in those climates, in those regions, it's experienced at a much greater level. And then as a result of that, that seasonal affective disorder results in higher levels of anxiety, higher levels of depression, higher levels of suicide even. So pretty important to get sunlight. So it helps balance hormones. It also, we know, decreases risk of cancer. And I know that sounds like a pretty crazy one because some of us have been scared into believing that sunlight causes cancer and we should be scared of it. So we'll talk about that. It decreases the risk of osteoporosis through increasing things like vitamin D3, which improves bone health. It decreases the risk of cognitive or brain decline as we age. And then really, if you understand the importance of what we call our biological clock and our circadian clock, and if you understand that things like sunlight, things like grounding that we're going to talk about, and sleep, those things, they help balance the circadian clock. They help balance and improve our biological clock. And if you understand the importance of those, we really wouldn't even have to discuss all of the other things with hormone release and brain health and heart health and cancer decrease, because we know that if you're improving your circadian clock and if you're improving your biological clock, you are in turn improving every other aspect of your health without exception. Back to the cancer, the scary part of sunlight. Obviously, you don't want to spend all day in the direct, bright sun. So from that aspect, absolutely, sun can cause damage to our skin. It can cause damage to our eyes. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about getting adequate amounts. And the reality is that the average American, or the average person around the world for that matter, doesn't get adequate amounts of sunlight on a daily basis, and that has detrimental effects on our overall health. So as a general rule, you want to get a minimum of 30 minutes of sunlight during the day. And ideally, you want to have as much of your skin exposed as possible, within reason, obviously, but you don't have to. So if you're somebody that's extremely sensitive to the sun, you don't have to be in that direct sunlight for 30 minutes, especially on a hot day. One of the most important aspects of sunlight is the sun actually entering your eyes. And no, that doesn't mean staring directly at the sun, although you can do that during sunrise and sunset, but not staring directly at the sun. Just having that sun enter your eyes triggers many of these effects that we're talking about today, with the balancing of hormones, the balancing of your circadian clock. So 30 minutes of direct sunlight during the day. And then ideally, and we're really going to talk more about this, setting the tone for your day, setting the tone for your sleep, setting the tone for recovery by getting 10 minutes of direct sunlight within the first hour of waking every single day, or every day that that's possible. And we'll talk about the ideal situations because some of this sometimes sounds overwhelming when we talk about incorporating all of the things that we're going to talk about today. So before we dive more into sunlight and we dive more into that ideal situation of how we can get it on a daily basis, let's talk about something called blue light. So blue light is a really hot topic, especially over the last, I would say, 5 to 10 years. And really, when we talk about blue light, or if you hear about blue light, if you're aware of it, most people think like blue light bad automatically. So should we be scared of blue light? What is it? And is it something that we should try to avoid? So first, let's talk about what it is. So blue light, without diving into the science too much, blue light really is just the shortest wavelengths of light with the highest amount of energy. And so just a fun fact, at least I think it's a fun fact, is that the blue light, those wavelengths, are what create a blue sky on a sunny, cloudless day. It makes the sky look blue, hence the name blue light. So these shortest wavelengths, these highest energy wavelengths, are absolutely essential for life, and they are good, but they can also be bad. Here's the good. The good is when they come from what God gave us, which is sunlight. So the good, it helps set your biological clock. And we're going to talk about what that means in a really, really mind-blowing, important study on the biological clock. And then your circadian clock. So it helps set the biological clock. It also helps set the circadian clock when we're getting appropriate amounts of blue light. And then it has many different effects on our physical, our mental health, including energy levels, focus, mood, sleep, memory, appetite, blood sugar regulation even, metabolism, and much, much more. As I already mentioned, if you understand circadian clock, you understand that it affects every single aspect of our entire body and who we are and every single aspect of our health. So let's talk about the way that our ancestors used light. So if we think of our ancestors, and this is prior to the invention of the light bulb, our ancestors' use of light was what? Sunlight throughout the day, and then at night, when it got dark, they either had darkness and went to sleep, or if they needed light, it was candlelight or a firelight. And that candlelight or a firelight is a warm, orangish, reddish type of light. So that's really important to understand. That is the way that our ancestors lived, and it's really the way that we should live, and we can learn from that. So we know the good, all of the stuff that we talk about, and we know that that good is incredibly important. So when we talk about the good affecting our biological clock, for example, what that means is if you're getting the proper amounts of blue light entering into your eyes throughout the day, that biological clock, meaning that clock that tells our bodies how to age, that biological clock will tell your body, in fact, when to hit the stages of puberty and every other aspect of our biologically. So we age the way that we're supposed to, ultimately. That's what the biological clock means. The circadian clock sounds kind of kooky to people. The circadian clock is a very real thing. That is our 24-hour clock. It tells us when we should wake up. It tells us when we should be more awake, be more alert, be more focused throughout the day. And then it also tells us when we should go to sleep at night. So when we're getting the adequate amounts of light and darkness, our circadian clock works the way that it's supposed to. And that circadian clock, by the way, exists, and this is really important to understand. So if you understand this, you will understand the importance of the circadian clock. There is a circadian clock in every single cell in our entire body without exception. Every cell of our brain, our skin, our bones, every cell in our entire body contains a circadian clock within it. That is that 24-hour clock. So blue light is fantastic when you are getting the proper amounts of it at the proper time of day, which of course is sunlight, the way that it's supposed to be. When blue light becomes bad, and when we talk about it being a scary thing, and you have blue light glasses and all of these different things, filters on your computers and your phones to filter out blue light, that's because that is artificial blue light. And artificial blue light during the day really isn't that big of a deal. It's artificial blue light when we're not supposed to be getting blue light in our eyes that throws off our circadian clock. So we know that if you are getting that artificial blue light after the sun goes down, for example, by staring at a laptop, by staring at your phone, by watching TV, by having bright lights on in your home, that is what throws off the circadian clock. It suppresses something called melatonin. Pretty much everyone is familiar with melatonin, but melatonin is the sleep hormone. And if you throw off that sleep hormone by not allowing your body to produce the melatonin, so I'll back up a little bit. Melatonin, as I said, is the sleep hormone. Your body naturally, if the circadian clock is working the way that it's supposed to, your body will start producing more melatonin as the day goes on. As less blue light enters your eyes, melatonin rises naturally. And that release of melatonin in your body is what allows your body to get tired and then ultimately fall asleep and stay asleep, which is really, really important. But we're exposed to so much of this artificial blue light. That is where the bad comes in. So that artificial blue light suppresses melatonin. It throws off your circadian clock. It creates difficulty in falling asleep and staying asleep. And that study that I mentioned earlier, this is pretty crazy. So we know that over the last really 70 years since they've been looking at this, that puberty in especially girls has been happening at an earlier and earlier rate. And that was magnified during the COVID pandemic. So it's really where they started looking at it closer because they know, like, holy cow, these numbers are changing more rapidly than we had ever seen before. We're seeing in a 2 to 3 year period of time a change more rapid than we saw in the previous decade to 2 decades of time. And so this early onset of puberty to the point where some girls are going through that change in their body, biological clock now we're talking, that change in their body as early as 8 years old. That has detrimental effects on their emotional and physical health at that age, but as they continue to age. We know that it throws off the entire biological clock, it throws off their circadian clock, and when they study this, yes, as there is with so many things, there's many factors. This is multifactorial, from stressors to the bad food that we put into our body, to the lack of exercise, to the lack of sunlight, proper blue light. But we know the study, this huge study that they did, showed that the number one factor was blue light exposure. This blue light exposure is causing girls and boys, but especially with females, to enter puberty at a much earlier stage. So it doesn't, in my opinion, all you need is that study to really say, holy cow, if it can do that, then what else can it do to our bodies? And this is why it's so important to talk about blue light exposure, to talk about how we can limit blue light exposure in a way that we can still function in society, that we're still using our cell phones, we're still using our tablets, our laptops, we're still watching TV, all the things that I do, all the things that my family does, and all of the things that you are going to continue to do and are not willing to give up. So we're not talking about giving them up. We're talking about how to limit the exposure in a sensible way where we're not throwing off our circadian clock, and especially with our children, we're not throwing off their biological clock. So here are the simple rules that you can follow. Number one, avoid as much blue light as possible 2 to 3 hours before bedtime. So how do you do that realistically? So some realistic ways are, obviously in the ideal world, you would just remove all tablets and computers and cell phones within 2 to 3 hours before bedtime. I know for me personally, that's not realistic, and I know it isn't for most people. So what can we do? Well, almost all cell phones and tablets now come with a blue light filter that you can just turn on. If you have an older phone, or if your phone or tablet doesn't happen to come with that filter, then you can download different apps. You can now download an app onto your laptop. So my laptop in front of me right here, I use an app called Flux, Flux. You can go into settings on those apps, or those internal settings in your phone, and you can change, you can have the blue light filter on 24/7 if you choose to, like I do on my cell phone. I also have that on my app, but you can also set it to sunrise and sunset. So as soon as the sun is setting, your blue light will decrease dramatically. Your screen will change to more of an orangish yellow. You can also control the amount of that. So that's a really sensible way that you can do that. Now, TVs, to my knowledge, don't have this yet, because most people probably don't want to watch TV in orange. I actually, to me, because I understand the importance of that, there's no question if I had a TV that had that setting, if they start making those, then that will be something that I can get. But here is what my family does when it comes to TV, because we don't watch TV really during the day at all. Our children don't watch TV. They're outside. When the sun's up, they're outside, they're playing. At night, this is typically when we do watch an hour or so of television, and we do that after dinner, and a lot of times it gets close to bedtime. So we have blue light glasses. So blue light glasses, you can have daytime blue light glasses that look like normal glasses. They just have a tint in the lens that will limit blue light. So these are really good things for people to have if you're working on a computer all day long and staring at that screen. But at nighttime, you can have orange blue light glasses, meaning that the lenses on those glasses are orange. Yes, you look a little bit weird, but you're in your own home, so who cares? So you can have these orange blue light glasses, and you can use those for watching television. My favorite place for getting orange blue light glasses or daytime blue light glasses is a company called Bon Charge. So Bon Charge is out of Australia, BON, Charge. They're out of Australia. They make fantastic blue light glasses. They make fantastic blue light or orange bulbs, rather, which I'm going to talk about next because it's my favorite new, what they call a biohacking tool. If you've never heard that term, it just means a simple way that you can change your biology. So the second tip, so tip number 1 again, avoid 2 to 3 hours before bedtime any of that artificial blue light. You can turn on filters on your phone, your tablets, your computers, laptops, all of that. The other tip is we're getting blue light from overhead bulbs. We're getting blue light from any artificial light source. And that blue light from our light bulbs also, especially in daytime bulbs or daylight bulbs, the brighter they are, the more blue light they emit. So really simple. If you don't, like some people are really attached to their blue light bulbs, but if not, you can just change all the bulbs in your home to a more warm light. What I do and what I now have in the last month, and I absolutely love, Bon Charge, that same company makes an OLED bulb. OLED means organic LED, organic in the sense that it's producing its own light. I don't know exactly how the science works, but it's an OLED bulb. These OLED bulbs have no flicker, which is huge. LEDs typically have an undetectable flicker, which affects our brain and affects our focus and our memory and sleep and all of that, throws off our circadian clock. So OLED bulbs have no flicker, and they also produce little to no EMF. And EMF is a topic for another discussion. Actually, we are going to talk about it a little bit during grounding today. But EMF, basically think of it as dirty electricity. So a typical LED bulb will throw off dirty electricity, this undetectable flicker, and it affects our circadian clock and our overall health. Well, these new bulbs, they just have 3 built-in light sources to the same bulb. So you turn on that switch one time, and your light will turn to daylight. Turn on that switch a second time, your light will turn to an orangish or a yellowish warm night light. And so ideally 2 to 3 hours again before bedtime, as the sun's going down, depending on the time of year and where you're at in the world, you can turn on that orangish light at night. Still plenty bright for you to see. It just eliminates the blue light. So that night light goes on at night, and then in the morning, the third switch, when you flick that switch again, it's going to turn the light to some blue light, but lesser blue light. It's more of a warm light in the morning, which is what we're supposed to naturally experience as the sun is rising. Those are, again, our OLED light bulbs from a company called Bon Charge. You can get those blue light blocking glasses from that exact same company. And then this is something that I just heard this week, but I really love it. So I think it's worth discussing. It's what is called the 20-20-20 method for people that are on computers all day long. So if you're that person that's staring at your computer screen all day long, I think we all know that that's not good. But one of the reasons that it's not good is we know that people that have more computer time will lose their vision for seeing things far away at a much quicker rate. And the reason they do that is because your eyes don't get trained to properly see things at a distance because they're so strained from staring at that computer screen. And then the other reason is because of the artificial blue light. So reducing the artificial blue light is huge, which we already talked about. But this 20-20-20 method is setting a timer every 20 minutes that you will then, at that 20 minutes, look away from your computer for 20 seconds for something that's at least 20 feet away. So that might involve you leaving the office, but the key, or leaving your office computer setting, the key is every 20 minutes for 20 seconds, you're looking at something at least 20 feet away. Now, ideally, You would go to a window, you would go to an open door, or step outside and look at something far off in the distance. The further away, the better. That helps reduce eye strain. It helps retrain your eyes. So I think it's a really good rule to follow. Also, you could incorporate, we're going to talk about it later, something called health stacking. You can incorporate something called health stacking where that 20-20-20 method also allows you to stand up, do a little stretching, so you're stacking these different things and incorporating them throughout the day. So the 20-20-20 method, again, something new, but something that I think is hugely important. So we're going to shift gears here now and move into grounding. So grounding, otherwise known as earthing, I can tell you when I discuss this with patients in my office or have this discussion with friends or family members, I get that look like, oh, here we go. Dr. Kevin's crazy again. He's going off on these weird cuckoo type things. If you understand grounding, there's nothing kooky about it really at all, just sounds kooky. But grounding is one of the most studied things out there, believe it or not. It is based on very, very sound science that you can't even argue with. So what is it? Well, to understand grounding and how it benefits the body, you have to first understand something that I think everybody should learn starting in first grade, but most people, most adults have no idea even exists. The earth resonates 24/7, never stops. The earth has a hertz that it resonates at called the Schumann's resonance. The Schumann's resonance is 7.83 hertz, which means a lot of times it's called the heartbeat of the earth. And the heartbeat of the earth is about 8 beats per second. That's what hertz means. So 7.83 hertz, Schumann's resonance, Google it, look it up. It's really important to understand because here's what we know. If you are tapping into that natural resonance, that natural electricity of the earth, it has tremendous potential benefits for your body. And it's really similar to the discussion that we just had on sunlight and natural blue light versus artificial blue light. Natural blue light, good. Artificial blue light, not good when you're getting it at the inappropriate times of day. Good is grounding with the earth. Bad would be the electricity that we get from everything else. So for the sake of today's discussion, we'll call it good versus the dirty electricity. The dirty electricity is what I get from using my laptop. The dirty electricity is what's all around us from our appliances and our television. And this also isn't something that's kooky. It's measurable. It's literally out into the air, this resonance, and we absorb this dirty electricity into our body. So the way that it's often described is the grounding of the earth, this resonance, is negative electrons. So negative sounds like a bad thing, but this is a good thing. So these negative electrons, which you can absorb from the earth through grounding, which we'll get into how you can do that, they help to balance the positive, which is dirty, but the positive electrons that you are absorbing from all of your appliances and cell phones and laptops and everything else that we use throughout the day. Similar to what we discussed with sunlight, this dirty electricity, or blue light rather, this dirty electricity causes an imbalance of hormones. It throws off your biological clocks. It throws off your circadian clock. It creates inflammation in the body. It creates aches and pains in joints and muscles. It throws off your sleep, which throws off your recovery, which throws off your healing. The good, the grounding, absorbing those negative electrons from the earth, does the opposite of that. It helps to rebalance that natural electricity, the natural biological clock, the natural circadian clock in our body. So that's what grounding is based on. Now, how do you do it? Here's the good news. You can ground outside from dirt, sand, rocks, being in natural water, not swimming pool water, natural water, by being in the grass, by touching trees, by touching plants, and the really, really good news for a lot of people, depending on where you live in your environment, you can also ground through cement. You can even ground through a tile floor in your basement that's on cement. You can ground through pavers. What you can't do is ground through blacktop. So blacktop contains a lot of chemicals and oils, and because of that, grounding cannot take place through blacktop, and it cannot take place with shoes on. So you do not ground if you're outside with shoes on, unless of course they're special. They actually make grounding shoes for kids and adults that have leather bottoms, still allows you to ground. I actually have something called Earth Runner sandals. These Earth Runner sandals have a little metal plug on the bottom that also allows you to ground when you're wearing them. And then you can also buy now some grounding shoes for running or for hiking or walking. It's not something that I've bought yet, but I actually plan to buy those in the future, because you can't, like, there's no upper limit on this, meaning that you can't overground. The more we're in contact with the Earth's surface, we know that the benefits just continue to increase. So some things to be aware of. I already talked about you cannot ground on blacktop. You can't ground with shoes on. You should also, because there's pros and cons to everything, right? You can stand in the grass and ground and reap the benefits of grounding. But if your grass is sprayed with pesticide, not in a million years would I say that the pros outweigh the cons there. So I think the cons of that pesticide sprayed grass would outweigh the pros, because you absorb a lot of those pesticides through your feet. So avoiding pesticide sprayed grass, so if you're in a park or someplace that you're unaware if it's pesticide sprayed, to me that would be where you would want to avoid it. And if you're really interested in grounding more and more, where you would invest in something called Earth Runner sandals or grounding shoes. You can also ground on the inside of your house. A little bit of a warning for this one, which we'll get into. So they've become really popular to buy grounding sheets, to buy grounding mats. A lot of people use grounding mats while they're sitting working on their computer, and they've got this grounding mat plugged into an outlet. So it plugs into the ground in your outlet. So if you're not aware, those 3 holes for your outlet, the bottom round one, that's the ground. And so it literally taps into the ground of the earth to ground the electricity. And so a grounding sheet or a grounding bed or a grounding mat plugs into that ground, and you can ground in your house. Now, in the ideal world, those are fantastic. And so without getting too far into this, here is my caution and why I don't currently use those, but I have in the past. So we know that unfortunately that ground is not always done right, because in the United States, we really don't have any regulations for how something is grounded and if it's grounded properly. The electrical inspection in other countries, they're making sure that it's grounded properly. We don't have that in the United States. So you can't get electrocuted from the ground, but it contains dirty electricity. And so most houses, most buildings in the United States have a large amount of dirty electricity. So in my opinion, if you're not having that tested, if you haven't had that tested to find out if your house or your office building is grounded properly, you can assume it's not. And I personally wouldn't use the grounding sheets or mats. Here's the good news is you can, if you want to take this to the next level, you can absolutely have somebody come into your house to test these things and then to change it so that it is grounded properly. I have a really good friend. His name is Joe Darnell. He's local here. Absolutely, if you're local to where I am, which is in the Chippewa Valley in Wisconsin, you can use Joe Darnell. He's fantastic. So Joe Darnell's website is Flutterbusters. People exist all over the United States that do this. You just have to search for them. But Joe and people like him will come into your home. They can test the amount of dirty electricity coming off of your grounds and your outlets to different appliances, and teach you how to have a better, healthier environment in your house. And so that if you choose to use a grounding mat, a grounding sheet, you know that you are doing it safely, reaping the benefits of grounding as opposed to getting some of the detriments of dirty electricity. You can look for ways to ground on a regular basis. Just like anything, what I recommend so this stuff doesn't become overwhelming is you can find ways to incorporate this into your life. So you can look for ways, for instance, to be barefoot outside, doing your normal daily activities, going outside to get the mail. You have a cement driveway, walk on the cement driveway down to get your mail, take a little extra time, breathe in some fresh air, absorb some sunlight. Or you can walk in the grass if you have a lawn that's not sprayed with pesticides. In Wisconsin, and I don't know if this is popular everywhere, but I see people sitting all of the time with their garage door open on a lawn chair, just sitting in their driveway. Well, instead of sitting in that lawn chair in your garage, staring out with your shoes on the ground, then use bare feet. Take your shoes off, ground on the concrete, because reminder, you can ground on concrete. And then you can also ground while you're just standing, walking around, working in your garage, if you're in a basement with a tile floor or in a basement with a cement floor. So just look for ways to incorporate this into your normal daily activities, and it won't become overwhelming. In fact, it becomes fun, and my tagline always is make health your hobby. You literally, these are the things that you can do to make health your hobby. You know, hey, I'm getting the mail, but I'm also grounding while I'm doing it. I'm standing here grilling, which I love doing, but I'm now grilling on my cement sidewalk with bare feet, and I'm grounding at the same time. So really key to just incorporate these things into your daily life. Shifting gears once again. So we talked about sunlight, we've talked about grounding, and now we're going to talk about my third favorite form of recovery, which is fresh air and breathing. So ideally, you're combining these two where you're doing more what's called breath work or breathing patterns while getting fresh air at the same time. Really crazy, but so many people are worried about air quality, and rightly so. Our air quality sometimes is not so good. But do you know that on average in a home in the United States and in an office building, even worse, or a gym for that matter, even worse, we know that the air on average is 10 times more toxic in your home, in your office building than it is when you are outside. That's on average. So it doesn't become much more important to get fresh air. Now, talk about how can you combine these things. Ideally, while you're getting fresh air, you're also having skin exposed, you're getting sunlight, that natural blue light entering your eyes, you're standing barefoot on concrete or on grass and grounding. So you're combining all of these things. And then if we talk about how to reap the benefits of breathing and the benefits of breathing just naturally, how to improve upon those, doing it outside or indoors, it's still beneficial, but ideally you're doing this outside. So there's a term called breath work. So this is also one, just like grounding, where people are like, that's kooky, that's weird, this is something that hippies do. And I would fully agree, breath work sounds like a kooky term. But think of it as a change of breathing pattern, because that's really all it is. You are just changing your breathing pattern, which changes our physical and emotional health. And we know that just like grounding and sunlight changes our circadian clock, either for the good or the bad, depending on how you're using those things, we know that breath work and breathing can do the exact same thing. So if you think about being very stressed, very anxious about something, your body naturally will breathe shorter, faster breaths. In the short term, this is good. They call it the fight or flight syndrome, right? So it helps you to run away from a scary situation, a burning building, a dog that's chasing you. You will increase cortisol and these hormones that help you to escape those stressful, scary, dangerous situations. But the problem is that we're stressed and anxious so much, we're under so much stress that naturally people are breathing shorter and faster all of the time. And if you're doing that, it increases all the bad stuff in your body that we've already talked about today. It throws off cortisol levels. Cortisol is naturally higher all the time. Good hormones like serotonin is naturally lower all of the time. You also throw off your circadian clock. You throw off your biological clock. All of these things are really going in the wrong direction. Now you think about the opposite of that. When you're relaxed, when you're sleeping, you have naturally deeper and slower breathing. Deeper and slower does the opposite of what we just talked about. It increases those good things, increasing serotonin, decreasing cortisol, balancing your circadian clock. So really what breath work is, or breathing patterns, you're just simply tapping in to the normal processes, and you're doing that for your benefit. So you're tapping into these normal processes that already take place in the body. You're using them for your good. If you Google breath work, forms of breath work, different breathing patterns, you'll find so many of them out there. And there are many, many good ones. A lot of people that do yoga or similar things or meditation are very familiar with different types of breath work. And so many of them are so good, and I am not an expert on them. So we'll probably do a podcast in the future where I have somebody who is an expert on this. But I can tell you, I have listened to podcasts, I have read books, I have read articles. And what I try to take away from everything is, how can I incorporate this into my life? So for me right now, I wouldn't say realistically, but I would say it's just not important enough for me to take 15 to 30 minutes or longer to do breath work throughout the day. At some point in my life, maybe that will become more important. So right now, I look at it through the scope of how can I incorporate this into my life in a really simple way that isn't going to take me a lot of extra time. So because of that, because of how I look at it differently, I have two favorites. So one, if you've ever listened to the Andrew Huberman podcast, you're probably very familiar with. It's called the Physiological Sigh. I find this to be fascinating. So if you look at a sigh in general, what is a sigh? A sigh is that breathe in, breathe out, right? So you take that deep breath in and you breathe out. Well, here's what we know about the sigh. The sigh is something that's done in every culture of the world without exception around the globe. So one scientist, and I don't remember his name, but he said, okay, well, if every person in every society, every culture around the world naturally sighs when they're stressed or anxious or upset, if they naturally sigh, you don't think about it, it's just something that happens, there must be something to it. So they started studying the sigh. They found out that that one sigh has a tremendous benefit for calming your nervous system, for changing hormones instantaneously. They then looked at, well, can you improve upon that? And this is where the physiological sigh came about that Dr. Andrew Huberman has now made famous. The physiological sigh, what it looks like is you're just increasing that sigh. So you're taking the deepest nasal inhale you can possibly take until you can't inhale anymore, nasal meaning through your nose. Inhaling as far as you can, as much as you can, and then when you can't, you pause for a second and you do it again. So what that would look like is a second nasal inhale. So inhaling as far as you can, stop for a brief pause, second nasal inhale, and then breathing out through your mouth. Just literally doing that, and I didn't even do it all together and properly, I felt my entire physiology change. I felt my body relax. I felt a warm, tingly sensation in my muscles. And it sounds crazy, but it literally is one of the most powerful things that you can do. So here's how you can, and how I do incorporate this into my life. I love strength training. I love working out. I love running, trail running, that is. I love a bunch of different things about exercise. So how you can incorporate this into an exercise routine is after each working set. So let's say, for instance, I did 10 repetitions of a bench press. When I put that bar back on the rack, before I even sit up, because this is now a habit for me, I do 1 to 2 physiological sighs. So I'll take that deep nasal inhale till I can't anymore, take another one, blow out, and I do 1 to 2 depending on the amount of work. So when I'm bench pressing, I'm working a lot harder, my heart rate goes up, breathing pattern goes up a lot, which it naturally should. I do 2 typically physiological sighs after that. And what that has been shown to do is calm your nervous system. It will help balance hormones. So it doesn't allow the cortisol to get out of control, helps to balance cortisol and serotonin. And we know that it helps with recovery. So this is well studied in labs. And we know that recovery improves, which is what we're talking about today, right? Post-workout, ideal situation is you're done with your workout and now you're taking at least 3 full physiological sighs to calm your nervous system, to calm your body after that workout and help with recovery time. This is also something that I do after a long run. When I finish my run and finish my stretching routine, I sit in my car. Before I drive away from my trail runs, I do 2 to 3 physiological sighs. Before I go to bed at night, this is one of the most powerful things that you can do before you go to bed. Literally last thing, as you lay down on your pillow, you take 3 physiological sighs. It will calm your nervous system, calm your brain, balance hormones, helps you get into a deeper sleep remarkably faster. So that's my first favorite. My second favorite is something called cyclic hyperventilation. So cyclic hyperventilation sounds kind of scary. Hyperventilation always sounds scary, right? And it is something that you need to be careful with. So cyclic hyperventilation, what that looks like is you are intentionally hyperventilating. So cyclic hyperventilation will do the opposite of what a physiological sigh will do. This is going to increase focus. It's going to increase mood. It will increase energy. So with a cyclic hyperventilation, what that looks like is you are breathing fast up through your nose and out through the mouth. So it would look something like this. I'm just going to do about 3 or 4 of them. So literally in doing 3 of those, you start to feel some tingling from that hyperventilation. But to go through a complete set of cyclic hyperventilation, which is something you want to work up to without a doubt, because it can be dangerous and you can hyperventilate if you overdo it. But ideally, you want to get to the point where you can do 25 of those in a row. And then after the 25th one, you would breathe all of your air out through your mouth. So a long exhale through your mouth. You would then hold that for 15 to 30 seconds. And then from there, you would repeat. And you would do that for up to 5 minutes. So this is something, again, you have to work up to. If you've never done cyclic hyperventilation, do 10 repetitions of it and see how you feel. And almost everybody will experience some of that tingly feeling, that your brain literally feels like it wakes up. You have better focus, better energy. I used it actually before I started this podcast today, followed by a physiological sigh. So I wanted to increase my focus, increase my mood, increase my energy, but then also calm my nervous system. So I incorporated both of those right before I came into the building today. The ways that you can do this into your own life and just make it part of your routine is by doing it first thing in the morning. So you do a cyclic hyperventilation cycle first thing in the morning to help wake yourself up. You can do it pre-workout. It will allow your body to get more energetic, to be more focused, to do that right before a workout, but then also to incorporate the physiological side during and after the workout. So you can use it throughout the day. You can use it pre-workout. You can use it at the beginning of the morning to wake yourself up in the morning. Hugely beneficial. So those are my 2 simple ways. Again, there's multiple ways of doing breath work, but those are the 2 most simple, easy ones, in my opinion, to incorporate into your daily life. So we've talked about sunlight, the benefits, the pros, the cons of artificial light. We've also talked about grounding. We've talked about fresh air and breathing. And now we're going to talk about the fourth topic, which is sleep. And sleep is where, when we're talking about recovery, it doesn't get more important than this, right? So 85%, according to some studies, 85% of our healing takes place during the deep stages of sleep. So pretty important to know how to tap into those deep stages of sleep so you can tap into recovery and healing. Number one would be to change your mindset on sleep. Now, for some of you, this might not be necessary. For me, because I base my day often on productivity, sometimes I look at sleep as something that I just have to do. And I've changed my mindset tremendously over the last 6 months after listening to a really good podcast on this. And I changed my mindset from something I have to do to instead using sleep as a tool to improve every other aspect of my life. So that's worth repeating. Instead of looking at sleep as something that you have to do, look at it as a tool to improve every other single aspect of your life and your health, for that matter. Because ultimately, that's what it is. Sleep is recovery. Sleep is healing. Sleep is not boring, which my daughter Caprice says all the time. In fact, she literally said that last night when I said, time to start getting ready for bed. She's like, ugh, I hate sleeping. It's so boring. And I had that same mindset when I was younger. And then as I got older, my mindset was sleep interferes with my productivity. I just want to be awake longer so I can be more productive. Now I realize sleep is a tool to improve my productivity, to improve my life, to improve my energy, to improve my focus, to improve my mood, to improve my relationships, to improve every single aspect of my life. So what are things that you can incorporate into your sleep routine to improve upon your sleep mindset and your overall sleep habits? Number one, sound machine. So a sound machine does two things. It can calm your brain. If you're listening to, for instance, white noise, what they now call green noise, the sounds of nature, brown noise, fan noise actually is my preference. Fan noise mimics what they call green noise, the sounds of nature. I find white noise to be a little irritating. Some people love it. I have in fact, everybody in my family in their bedroom has a air purifier, and this air purifier has a fan setting on it. We set our fan setting to 3, and it's a perfect level for us to have that sound machine. So that's how we incorporate two things at the same time. We're purifying our air at the same time that we're using it as a sound machine at night as we're sleeping. Number two, second tool would be using a sleep mask. For all the reasons that we talked about earlier, blue light entering your eyes after dark is not a good thing when it comes to sleep. And so using a sleep mask, just like it sounds, you can put a mask on over your eyes that blocks all light from entering your eyes. Now, ideal situation, your bedroom is as dark as possible and you don't have any light entering it. For most people, they find that to be pretty difficult to do. So we do have room darkening shades and room darkening blinds, and we don't have any light in our room. Some light automatically seeps in no matter what for almost everyone. So a sleep mask eliminates all of that. You can buy a sleep mask for $5 or less on Amazon. We recently purchased a 4-pack of sleep masks. I think it was $12.99 on Amazon. So sleep mask, really simple, easy thing to do. Something I recommend incorporating every single night. Next one, number 3, is going to sound kind of kooky to some people, but that is mouth taping. Sounds kooky, and to some people, when I bring this up, it sounds dangerous. I promise you, it is not dangerous in the large majority of situations. Obviously, depending on a potential difficulty or disability you may have, this might not be something you want to do. But nasal breathing, if we go back to breathing, nasal breathing is the ideal breathing that we should all be doing on a regular basis. So that means nasal breathing, breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth. You don't want to be a mouth breather for countless reasons. This is a topic for another podcast. But mouth breathing on a regular basis is bad. Nasal breathing is good, and you can train your body to become a nasal breather not only when you sleep, but also during the day by mouth taping at night. So mouth tape is really it's this X tape. You can buy this hypoallergenic tape on Amazon also, or probably lots of other places if you don't like Amazon. You can buy this hypoallergenic mouth tape, and you just simply, last thing you do before you go to bed, you put on this X mouth tape, keeps your mouth shut, and also allows you then to nasal breathe. When I wear my sleep mask and I mouth tape and I have my sound machine on, it is insane how deep of a sleep I get, how good I feel when I wake up, how much more productive I am throughout the day, my energy, everything improves. If there are times when I don't do that or are unable for some reason, then my sleep is dramatically different and I feel the effects of that. We even have our children mouth tape every single night. So we have our great family time and our family discussions, and then our kids know that when the lights go off, the mouth tape goes on. Another thing that you can do, fourth tip, is what we talked about earlier, getting those OLED full spectrum bulbs from Bond Charge that you can turn on 2 to 3 hours before bedtime, or really 2 to 3 hours is just a general rule, but as the sun goes down, bright lights go off in your house and the orange lights come on. Essential oils and smells are another great way. To be honest, this isn't something we've incorporated enough, and preparing for this podcast, I realized this is something we've gotten away from. But essential oils, lavender is by far my favorite. It's a lot of people's favorites, and lavender is known to be relaxing and calming and help people sleep. You can have an essential oil diffuser in your bedroom, or you can just simply put a few drops of lavender oil on your pillow, and often that is going to help you sleep better and sleep longer, hit those deep stages of sleep much faster. Room temperature is actually a really big thing. My entire life, I have enjoyed, at least thought that I enjoyed, sleeping at a warmer temperature. Now understanding what that does to our physiology, I sleep with my room temperature much lower. So the ideal situation is somewhere near 67 degrees, according to the research. You don't have to be at 67 degrees. If you're currently used to 75 degrees, and you want to try 72, you're moving in the right direction, but ideally somewhere around 67 degrees, according to the lab research, is what allows us to hit those deep stages of sleep better. And then the next tip is having a consistent schedule. So a consistent schedule at night, meaning that you have all of those things that we've already talked about, that you know that you need to eliminate or limit blue light exposure for 2 to 3 hours before bed. It also means that you have a consistent sleep schedule when it comes to timing. So meaning that if your life allows, you're not going to bed at 8 o'clock one night and 11 o'clock the next night. You're not waking up at 4 o'clock one day and noon the next day, to use an extreme, because I do hear these extremes when talking to patients on a regular basis. A consistent sleep schedule is not just something that we think is better. We know when we study people in sleep labs, if somebody has a consistent schedule that you're going to bed within an hour or so of that same time every night and waking up within an hour or so of the same time every morning, that consistent schedule allows you to hit the deep stages of sleep faster. Your circadian clock becomes balanced, and it's going to be better for your overall health. And then having a consistent routine, all of the things that we're talking about right now with the lavender and the sleep mask and the mouth tape. Getting in a consistent routine is huge. Exercising throughout the day is huge. Getting good quality food during the day, getting good hydration throughout the day, but limiting your hydration 60 to 90 minutes before bed is another really important thing. Sunlight during the day, grounding, breath work, ideally with fresh air. All of these things are going to improve your sleep at night. So you're really looking at your morning routine, your daily routine, and your nighttime routine is setting you up for better recovery, better sleep, better healing as you go to bed every single night. I realize that everything that we just talked about is a lot, and I promise we're going to tie it all together. We're just going to discuss a few more things here on sleep, and then I'm going to simplify everything for you. So some things to avoid. So we just talked about tips to improve sleep. Now let's look at some things to avoid. You want to avoid blue light before bed. We've talked about that enough. You want to avoid light in your room. You want to avoid light during sleep. Something that a lot of people overlook is outside noise, TVs or radios while sleeping. The outside noise, really easy if you're using a sound machine. You can limit traffic noise or whatever it is depending on where you live. TV or radio, I hear this all the time that people will say, like, I fall asleep better if I just fall asleep while having the TV on in my bedroom or having a radio on. And that may be true. You may fall asleep faster, but we know what happens when you have that background noise. Yes, you're sleeping, but your brain is constantly hearing the TV. It's seeing the flicker of the light. It's hearing the radio. And as a result, you do not enter into the deep stages of sleep, or you hit them very briefly instead of for 2 to 3 hours like you ideally should. So it does throw off your healing and your recovery time. Also, you want to avoid alcohol in general, ideally, but ideally avoiding alcohol and food, especially in the 2 to 3 hours before you go to sleep at night. And the alcohol, because of how it affects sleep and circadian clock, it has a dramatic effect, more than blue light, in fact. And then food, because if you're ingesting food 2 to 3 hours, this is a large meal, 2 to 3 hours before bed, we know that increases energy production in the body. Your body's trying to digest food and it can't use that energy to calm down and go to sleep. So avoid food, avoid alcohol the 2 to 3 hours before bed. Caffeine, you want to avoid caffeine 8 to 10 hours ideally before sleep. Caffeine has something that they call a half-life. I don't even know where this term comes from. I mean, I know where the term comes from. It always sounds silly to me when they say things like caffeine has a half-life of 6 hours or 12 hours. It just means that the full life would be double that. Well, because of the half-life of caffeine, the ideal situation, it affects everybody differently, but you want to ideally avoid caffeine within 8 to 10 hours of going to sleep. Because even if you're that person like I used to be in the past, where I could say like, oh, I can drink a cup of coffee or have a caffeinated beverage right before bed, I sleep fine. And I did. I went to sleep just fine, didn't get jittery. But I now know when they study people using caffeine, you're not hitting those deep stages of sleep, which is really what it's all about. So it's not whether or not you fall asleep, it's the quality of your sleep. So here's a really good rule that I learned about 6 months ago or so. I had a Facebook post about this, and it's called the 10-3-2-1-0 sleep rule. So the 10 is avoiding caffeine 10 hours before sleep. The 3 is avoiding food and alcohol 3 hours before sleep. The 2 is avoiding stressful things, financial discussions, work or work discussions 2 hours before sleep. The 1 is turning off all screens an hour before sleep. And ideally, as we already talked about, 2 to 3 hours before sleep, you're at least incorporating the orange lights, filters, all of that. And then the 0 is hitting your snooze button 0 times. Actually set your alarm for the time that you need to get up. And there is science behind that, and there's a reason, but it's really important when it comes to staying in those deep stages of sleep, that healing sleep, that brain sleep longer. So when you actually need to get up, that's when the alarm should be set. Little secret, if you put your alarm away from your bed where you can't reach it, it forces you to get out of bed, ideally across the room or in another room that you can still hear it, forces you to get out of bed, and then the odds of hitting a snooze button going back to bed are going to decrease dramatically. And if you're not ready to incorporate the 10-3-2-1-0, something is always better than nothing. So just start making changes for the better. As I mentioned, we've talked about a lot today. I'm going to simplify things for you. We're going to end with some really common sense ways that you can incorporate everything that we talked about into your life and more in a really, really simple way. Because I realize when you listen to a podcast like this, you can say like, holy cow, like that is so much information. I'm already so busy. That's impossible or nearly impossible to incorporate that into my life. So how can you do that? So I mentioned a term earlier called health stacking. So health stacking, I've never heard that term before. I should probably coin that term. So health stacking is just like it sounds. It's when you're stacking things together that improve your health. So if you health stack for your morning routine, you can incorporate everything we talked about today and more. So I'm going to talk about the ideal situation. And I realize life is not ideal, and you can come up with all of the different reasons that, well, this doesn't work for me because of this, and you have no idea how busy I am. I like, actually, one of my favorite mottos is results, not reasons. So results meaning that you're looking at a situation and saying, okay, how can I get those results? How can I incorporate those things into my life instead of looking at the reasons you can't do it? So reasons ultimately are excuses. Sounds kind of harsh, but that's what they are. So you can either say, okay, the reason exists, like, yeah, I have a busy schedule and I've got kids to get ready for school. You can use those as an excuse, or you can say those reasons exist, but how can I get results despite those reasons? And if you look at it from that standpoint, then you can incorporate these things just like anybody can. So let's talk about the ideal situation, and then we'll talk about a few alternatives and options after that. So here's the ideal situation. You wake up, and within 15 to 45 minutes of waking, you are going outside for 15 minutes barefoot while grounding. So you're on a surface that allows you to ground. Your skin is exposed to the sun and you're facing the sun. So ideally you're waking up with the sunrise and you're actually watching the sunrise. That's the most benefit. But whenever your schedule allows you to wake up, you're going outside 15 to 45 minutes within waking. You're outside for 15 minutes barefoot, so grounding on a grounding surface, facing the sun, skin exposed, and then while you're facing the sun and grounding and breathing in the fresh air, you do some cyclic hyperventilation. So this is my morning routine. I go through that 25. I don't do the full 5 minutes. I just do 25 repetitions of that cyclic hyperventilation. Insane to me how much it wakes me up. When I finish that, I go through what I talked about in episode number 2. That podcast was on motion, so something we call spinal hygiene. If you can't do, or you prefer not to do spinal hygiene, then go through your favorite stretching routine to wake up all of the joints in your body and the muscles throughout your body. And then after I finish with my spinal hygiene, I personally just take about a 5-minute walk while I'm doing some nasal breathing. And during that 5 to maybe 10-minute walk, I'm giving gratitude for all of the amazing things in my life. I say some prayers, and then I finish by setting my intention for the day. On our next podcast, we're going to dive into intention, which is pillar number 5 of foundational health. And if you're setting your intention for your day, you're doing this morning routine, you're giving gratitude, I promise you, your day is absolutely positively going to go better. You're going to recover faster. You're going to heal better without a doubt. So I promise you some alternatives and options, and I certainly can't go through every scenario possible because everybody's situation is different. Just look for the way that you can achieve results instead of focusing on the reasons. But a few of those would be if weather doesn't permit and you can't go outside at all, well, bare minimum, just standing in front of a window facing the sun, getting that natural blue light entering your eyes. It's not as good through a window. It's still better than not getting it at all. If you don't have a window, you're in an apartment where you literally don't have a window that faces the sun, you can't easily get outside because you're on an upper level, well, turning on some blue lights, and this is where artificial blue light can be beneficial. Turning on some blue lights to wake your brain up, getting that light entering your body will help to set your circadian clock throughout the day. If you can't get outside because of weather, you can still get potentially on a garage floor. You can get on a basement cement floor. If you have a yard that is pesticide sprayed, standing on some stone pavers does the trick. So there's a number of different things that you can do that will overcome all of those challenges. You can't stand? Well, sit in a chair outside with your bare feet on the ground facing the sun, or bare feet, or sitting in front of a window, even if you can't get outside to do the grounding. Just look for ways that you can incorporate this into your daily life, and I promise it will have a huge impact. So let's look at the big takeaways for the day. I call them the inspiration and education takeaways. So there's so many from today. We're going to focus on a few of them. As always, success equals simple habits performed daily over time. That will always be my number one takeaway. Number two, mindset and intention. So if you have the right mindset, the right intention, everything will improve. Look at how you can get results and not reasons. Number three, we know that your circadian clock weakens as you age. We know that your muscle loss increases as you age. We know that your cognitive decline decreases as you age. So this goes back to the mindset and intention. You can say, well, those things all just get worse and I need to accept them. I'm just going to age the way that my body is going to age. Or you can say, I am going to do everything I can to improve the way that my body ages, to improve my circadian clock, to limit the amount of muscle loss that takes place in the average person that doesn't work out. I'm going to limit the cognitive decline by continuing to do all of these healthy things for my brain and my body. The next takeaway is going through that ideal morning routine that I just described. That will be life-changing for you if you incorporate that, I promise. And then incorporating the 10-3-2-1-0 rule for sleep. Last takeaway, remember, you are a leader. Your children are watching you. The people around you are watching you. And the best way to lead is always to lead by example. Until next time, make health your hobby. Thank you for listening to the Foundational Health Podcast. As always, if you would like to learn more about making health your hobby, visit our website at foundationalhealth365.com and follow me on Facebook at Kevin Schultz, DC, Foundational Health.